Emily's identity as a healer is gradually revealed, and she must face and learn to control her powers. However, a mysterious enemy kidnaps her mother and threatens her not to look for her. How will Emily deal with this crisis, and can she successfully save her mother? Follow Emily's heartbeat, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss a single thrilling moment. Chapter 27. Things had certainly started to slow down. All the chaos was slowly subsiding. The silver bullet hasn't bothered me in the past 2 weeks. Thomas healed in a matter of days. His incident had actually brought the Crescent and Stone pack closer, and they felt obligated to find the intruder, the person who harmed a wolf in the territory both packs shared. I dismissed patrol duties. I was finally getting enough sleep, but of course I woke up with a start, some nights drenched in sweat and trying to regain my breathing. Thomas slept over some nights due to his overprotectiveness of me. Some nights Darren or Kelly would sleep over. Even my mom did. I felt weak, like I was being babysat, and eventually I snapped at them. However, they quickly dismissed me with pained expressions. I give it about 3 months before things stopped completely and my life would go back to normal, sort of. I was still trying to get used to the fact of werewolves of healers. It was hard to believe that something I thought of a myth not even less than 4 months ago. To conclude and summarize everything I have learned since then, healers are the highest caste of werewolves. No one knew we were still in existence, though. We had the ability to heal any werewolf, of course. Every healer has a specific way, though. Some would heal with their eyes, their lips, their chanting, and their saliva even. Mine would be my hands. Back to the pack, Eli and Abigail did not get together. Unfortunately. I thought since the incident and judging from their scene in the waiting room that they would. However, it seemed like a battle to Abigail. She didn't know what was the best for her. I later learned she was insecure. She was afraid to give her heart away to Eli again. They found out they were mates when Eli was only 14 and Abigail 15. He was young. He was scared. He rejected her because of it. The other reason was Charles. She loved Charles too. However, I wasn't going to get in the middle of her problem. It was her heart and her own rightful choice, and I respected that. However, another pair had finally became a couple. Jade and Jared were probably the most cutest, but the couple that showed the most public display of affection. Thomas would cringe, flinch, and his eyes would dilate every time the two would start to make out. However, I would simply put a hand on his chest, using my ability and calming his racing and angry heart. Basically, the two finally became a couple after Weston's incident. It brought them closer somehow. Jade gushed about how she found out Jared was her mate since she was 16. But was too slow to actually give his heart to him. This was due to her mother's death, of course. You're probably confused on the mate thing. Well, I am too, sort of. A werewolf pair finds their mate unexpectedly, even if they knew that person for the longest time. Another curse was put on them for killing most of the healers. A twist of fate would happen at any random time, leaving a stunned girl and a speechless boy. Oh, what a cruel world we live in. Back to the present. I never liked to talk about Weston's incident. It scarred me for life. However, I forbade it to enter my brain. Sometimes Thomas would joke around about it. Obviously, being alpha and all, he's used to these kind of things. And today I was going on another date with him. I told you I have hands and could open the door myself, I groaned, slapping him across the head right after I exited my house. Ouch, Thomas said, narrowing his eyes at me. He still held the door open to his car. I just wanted to be nice. You're so ungrateful. He playfully pouted, turning his head away like he didn't want me to talk to him. This was our usual greeting. I wrapped my arms around his waist, laughing and resting my chin on his chest. When he still refused to look at me, I kissed his neck once, hearing the low growl at the back of his throat. I smiled against his neck and started laughing, my real laugh, yeah, the one with the snorting. Thomas began laughing along with me. I kissed his nose and said, "You can't stay mad at me." He took both of my hands in his and looked down at me. His blue eyes seemed to have more spark than the stars in the sky. He smiled genuinely, resting his forehead on mine. Inhaling my scent, he said, "You look beautiful, Els." I snorted. I just slipped on light dark skinny jeans, a gray knitted, oversized long-sleeved sweater, black boots from Steve Madden, and my hair was up in a nice bun with a headband on my head. My makeup was minimum mascara and eyeliner only. To finish it off, my ears were studded with black pearls and I carried a black clutch. Thomas did say to dress comfortably. "You're the one that looks good," I admitted, biting my lip. I trailed my eyes down his body once and took him all in. He wore a dark gray button-up rolled up to his elbows and straight-fit jeans that hung low on his hips. His Nikes were well kept and his hair was short, but not overly so. He cut his hair and I found it attractive on him. Eventually, I hopped into his car and he drove off to a cozy pancake house. I smiled. He knew me too well. I loved eating at comfortable places rather than high-class restaurants where you had to sit so straight. It's not that I don't like eating at classy restaurants, I just preferred less crowds, small places, and a cozy feel. Another reason was the waffles. I loved the waffles here that I could eat at any time of the day. Our next stop was what surprised me. The pack house, I said, looking at the two-story building in front of us. I unbuckled my seatbelt and waited for the engine to die before getting out of the car. "Yeah," Thomas said, coming around the car and slinging an arm around my shoulder. "I just wanted some alone time with my girl." Poked out my tongue. "I'm not your girl, but you're my man." "Whatever you say, boss," he said, rolling his eyes. He took his keys and rummaged through them. When he finally found the right key, he pushed open the door. "I just wanted some peace and quiet. Take a break from all the work. Plus, I haven't spent alone time with you. I just want peace and quiet with my mate." I simply nodded. We decided on popcorn, a warm blanket, cuddling, and a movie. After debate on what movie to watch and many insults back and forth, I had one. With a grin, I happily skipped to the DVD player under the flat-screen television and pushed Captain America in. Eventually, after the part of his transformation, I got bored. I had to admit that we watched this particular movie way too much. This was all due to my obsession with Chris Evans and his nicely sculpted chest. I started to trace circles on Weston's stomach, my head leaning against his chest. I could feel his muscles underneath the fabric of his button-down. Looking up at Weston, I found him fast asleep. His mouth was slightly agape and his head dangled off the back of the couch. I chuckled at the scene. I pushed myself off the couch a bit and pressed a lingering kiss on Weston's soft and full ones. I giggled as his arms tightened around my waist. Pressing another kiss to his neck, his weakness, I smiled as I heard him groan. I stifled in my laughter. Watching him sleep was actually peaceful. Thomas was truly handsome. I trailed my finger down the side of his face softly, tracing the side of his closed eyes, high cheekbones, his strong jaw, and finally, the scar on his lips. His eyes fluttered open as I lingered my fingers there. "What are you doing?" Thomas eyed me suspiciously but kissed my fingers. "Nothing," I said, looking at him straight in the eyes. "I just think you're really handsome," I said bluntly. His arms pulled me closer to him. He smirked down at me and pressed a quick kiss to my lips. And he said, giving me a peck, "Your peck. Beautiful. Peck." He rested his forehead against mine, gulping and still looking at my lips. "You're really cheesy," I smiled, brushing my lips against his. I pressed my lips against his in a soft, tender kiss to show just how much I loved him. However, it quickly turned into the ones one of us had to end before we couldn't stop. But this time none of us stopped. Thomas pulled me on top of him, my legs going on each side of him on the couch. I pressed my chest close to his own, running my hands through his short black hair and locking them behind his neck. He groaned as I tugged at the bottom of his hair. He ran his own hands down the curves of my body painfully slowly. Somehow my thick sweater ended on the ground and all that covered my body from his hands was the thin fabric of my inside shirt. Thomas trailed kisses down my neck and jaw, casually nipping and grazing his teeth here and there. He went as far as to kiss the top of my breasts that were exposed at the top of my shirt. I moaned loudly, clutching him closer to me. I felt him smile against me. While he ran his hands up and down my legs, my hands found its own way to the buttons of his shirt. Slowly, I unbuttoned them until the front was completely open. Thomas returned to my lips, shivering and grunting under my touch as I roamed my hands down the tight skin of his chest and abs. He shrugged off his t-shirt, standing up from the couch. I wrapped my legs around his waist and felt as if I was the only one supposed to be there, like a puzzle piece. When I realized we were in one of the rooms, I felt my heart skipping a beat and kneed in between my legs. I started whimpering, wanting him more than ever. Thomas laid me on the bed, kissing me painfully slow. He took off my inside shirt, massaging my breasts through my bra and moaning loudly against my mouth. He pressed his whole body against mine, keeping his weight off of me at the same time. He left my mouth again, leaving kisses all the way down to my hips, which caused me to buck my hips forward and moan. When he returned to my face, I trailed my hands really low, tracing the edge of his jeans. His hips bucked forward, grinding against my bottom half. He grunted, keeping his firm, strong hands on my hips. Every place he touched me was set on fire. His body was flushed on mine. I shivered with delight under his touch and kisses. He too felt the same. I knew, and I was sure now that I wanted him. I tugged on Weston's belt buckle. He pulled back, a pained expression on his face, his hands tracing my face softly. "Are you sure?" he whispered in a pained voice, his eyes a steady black. I nodded, and I was sure my eyes held the same darkness. It reflected the same want in his eyes. That was all it took before his lips crashed down on mine. Our clothes were shed and were now on the floor, our naked bodies flushed together. "I love you so much, Els," Thomas whispered in my ear, smiling against it. Before I could tell him I loved him too, a loud cry of pleasure took its place as Thomas started mating with me. My phone beeped, waking me up from the best sleep I have had in my entire life of sleeping. I smiled, stretching and feeling the pain in between my legs. However, it was all worth it. I felt tons more closer to Thomas, and making love to him was indescribable. I loved him so much. Thomas groaned as I sat up, trying to reach my phone on the table lamp. I laughed as he tried to pull me back next to him. "Where are you going?" he said groggily, still not opening his eyes. 2 times in one night didn't make you exhausted. Holy crap, I got myself a winner. "Shut up," I squeaked, feeling the blood rush up my neck and into my cheeks. I pulled his arms around my waist off and stumbled out of bed. I pulled on my jeans and shirt, grabbing my phone on the way out. I got to call my mom before she worries. "No service in here. I'll be back in a few." Thomas groaned, flipping so his face was buried in the pillows. I rolled my eyes at him and slipped on my shoes before walking out in the cold night air. My face flushed again as I realized we stayed in the whole day. Unlocking my iPhone, my phone froze. Text message, unknown number. My eyebrows knitted together and I couldn't help the curiosity that grew. My thumb pressed open message. Once the message opened, my hand began to shake and my body grew cold. There on the screen was a video. I haven't played it yet, but the video clearly showed a lady, her dark hair drenched and a new scar cutting across her forehead. Her hands were tied behind her back and her feet were tied together while she sat on a single chair. Her white shirt was soaking into her shirt, dirt stains visible from the tiny player. Her brown eyes, filled with hatred, looked straight into the camera. Dim light spilled on her, splaying shadows of her and the items around her in what seemed like a warehouse. "Mom," my voice trembled into the night, barely above a whisper. Hesitantly, I pressed the button that scared me the most that evening. "Emily, whatever you do, don't come looking for me." Chapter 28. "Emily, whatever you do, don't come looking for me," my mom warned, looking straight into the camera. Her eyes held determination and meaningfulness. That was until she had to squeeze them tight and let out a scream of pain as the bucket that hung above her spilled its contents. She hissed and screamed, making me jump and want to drop the phone. Her skin began to bubble, steam emitting from her skin. Patches of skin became red. In 2 seconds her skin went back to normal. "Wolfsbane." She opened her eyes again, looking hatefully at something or someone behind the camera. She spat blood out. "What makes you think I will tell my daughter to come here?" There was no reply and she chuckled dryly. "You're pathetic," she spat, almost springing from her seat and tearing the ropes tying her down with her non-human strength. However, the wolfsbane was spilled onto her again. I shut my eyes tight, letting her scream that died at the end from her sobs of pain numb my ears. "Go ahead," my mom hissed out from gritted teeth. "Kill me." She then looked straight at the camera, her eyes dilating and patches of fur wanting to come out of her skin. I could see the muscles moving under her arms and on her face. The wolfsbane was holding her wolf back. A single tear spilled out of her eye before she said, "Emily, I'm sorry. I love you and Darren both. Please don't come after me. I would rather die than to live with the thought of my baby girl buried. I'll be fine. I'll find a way to get out if he." Wolfsbane was spilled onto her again. I gripped the phone tighter. In the middle of her agonizing cry, the video ended. It was only then did I realize how my whole body was shaking. Tears soaked my face, dripping down my chin and onto my shirt. My hands gripped my phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. I could feel the blood draining from my body, a cold darkness sweeping over me. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. My eyes were dilating and I could feel my wolf itching to come out of my body. However, I held it in. I had enough with whoever was playing sick jokes on me. They were hurting everyone I loved for a reason I'm not even sure of. To get as far as making my mom suffer made my stomach turn and cause a burning hatred to build up. I knew what I had to do. I had to find my mom and kill the person behind it all. Even if I die fighting. My mom has done so much for me and now it was my turn. Scrolling down the screen to the very bottom of the message, my claws were already coming out. A simple message was on the bottom. Old Jerry's Donuts Warehouse. 9:30 p.m. Failed to show up and your mother dies. I checked my watch. 8:00 p.m. Stuffing my phone in my back pocket, I strode towards the garage of the pack house, taking Weston's keys. Opening their secret cabinets, I stuffed a gun that shot bullets coated with wolfsbane, 3 grenades, and a silver long dagger that was coated with wolfsbane into the trunk of the Crescent Pack's backup car. Dear Weston. Babe mate. I began to write on a long sheet of paper. I knew Thomas was fast asleep upstairs and he would never approve of me going after my mom. He would keep me bound up like some weak person and do the job for me. However, this was a job only I could do. I felt a traitor tear spill from my eyes and soon more came after. I wiped them away, sobbing quietly. I returned my shaking hand to the paper. This is either a see you later or I'll come back soon. No goodbyes intended. I don't feel this is the end for us. Please don't try to look for me. I will explain everything if I come back, and if I don't, then I'm truly sorry. And I know you're probably going to be that selfish idiotic moron you are, and come and look for me. I'm not going to stop you. But please let me do this by myself. My mom's in trouble and it's my turn to be independent and stop relying on you. Just know if I don't come back, it's not your fault, it's mine. But don't hold on to the thought of that. I will come back. Thank you so much for teaching me the true meaning of love, of weakness, of pain, of laughter, of a best friend, of sadness, just everything. But most of all, thank you so much for showing me the true meaning of happiness. And you're my happiness. I love you so much. Or perhaps I loathe you so much. You gave me everything that no one else could. I decided to end there. My face was again drenched in tears. I couldn't bear the thought of dying. But in a situation like this, there is a 50% chance I won't be coming back. The thought of Weston's pain alone was unbearable. I kissed the paper, clutching it to my heart before leaving it in the key bowl. I love you, I whispered before climbing into the car and driving off. Thomas wouldn't hear me, he was fast asleep. When a wolf is asleep, their senses are dimmed. For once, I was thankful Thomas didn't follow me or the same incident as before would have happened. I cringed at the memory. 9:20 p.m. The road to the warehouse was empty. This part of town has been the less crowded. Usually, this was the best place to put annual carnivals because it was so open and not many civilization was put within a 10-mile radius. The old Jerry's Donuts warehouse was once here, but had closed down about 20 years ago. The warehouse was torn down, the paint peeling off the walls. Some letter of the name had fallen, so now it read, "Destiny." I parked about a mile down from the warehouse. Therefore, whoever this silver bullet was couldn't hear my car as I arrived. I hid behind a bush, my whole body sweating from the nervousness of them all. I eyed the warehouse cautiously and flinched as I saw movement from behind a window and a light turning on. I strapped on my belt, stuffing the 3 wolfsbane grenades and the silver dagger into the pockets. I stuck the gun in the waistband of my jeans and under my shirt, feeling the cool metal against my hot skin. As I thought of how to approach and tried to devise a plan in my head, I heard not one but 2 screams of pain. My eyes widened in horror as I froze in place. Who could the second person be? It sounded like a female scream. Aunt Felly, Kelly, Jade, Abigail. They screamed again, waking me up from my reverie. I was running out of time. 5 minutes and my mom and whoever the second person was could be killed. When they screamed again, a burst of confidence flowed through my body. "You're strong," my wolf whispered. As my wolf continually tried to soothe my nerves, I gave confident strides towards the building. A strange smell wafted into my nose, making my stomach churn and my eyes burn. Wolfsbane surrounded the perimeter. I growled in disgust. However, This didn't stop me from walking towards the door and slamming it open. A cold breeze and wretched smell hit me once the door banged on the wall. The open space was lit only by a dim light. Surrounding it were boxes, buckets with vile liquid that I assumed was wolfsbane, a table on the far corner, beer bottles scattered on top, and violent tools used to torture someone. My eyes wavered on the two people in the corner. Their eyes froze on me and widened. Their wrists were chained up on the wall and so were their ankles. They were practically dangling from their wrists, which looked like their arms wanted to fall out from soon. The places the chains were touching were red, new skin surfacing every 1 second, only to be burned again by the chains. The girl looked about my age. Her sapphire eyes looked at me in agony. Her platinum blonde hair was a mess. Dirt smudged her perfect complexion. New scar wounds ran up and down her arms and legs. She was only in a nightgown. I only realized now that they abducted her from her sleep. Her eyes red, run now as she shook when a breeze swept across the room. "Stacy," my voice quavered as I recognized her. I had to hold on to the door frame from the sight of her torture. It was hard to digest it all in, and for me to see it in person was undeniably heart-clenching and gut-punching. "What are you doing here?" she whispered quickly. "Emily, you have to go. Now." I shook my head, refusing to meet her eyes. The ones that were empty. All because of me. "Emily, baby," my mom said in a hushed whisper. "Please leave." My mom still looked the same as on the video, except now, her scar on her forehead had healed. To see her suffering for me brought tears to my eyes. None of these girls deserved it. I should be the ones in their places. It's me that they wanted, not them. "No," I said, striding forward and ignoring their protests. "You guys don't deserve this. You don't understand, Emily," Stacy urged. "You need to leave." As I touched Stacy's chains to try and break them, I flinched back and hissed in pain. I looked down at my hand to see a burn, only to be replaced by new skin and heal quickly. "Honey, don't touch the chains. They're covered in wolfsbane," Mom warned, moving towards me as if she could take me away from them. "I'm so sorry," I said, looking both of them in the eyes and back to where their bare skins touched the chains. "I will get you out of here." I heard an applaud from behind me. I jumped backwards in surprise, backing up towards the wall on instinct. I could barely make the outline of a figure in the back corner where there was no light. I squinted my eyes, trying to see who it was while resting my right hand on my dagger, getting ready to pull it out. I growled, my lips stretched to expose my clenched teeth. "Emily, Emily, Emily, so glad you could join us. I have to say I'm slightly disappointed you showed up. I was looking forward to watching these two women suffer some more." My growling stopped immediately. I knew that voice. It was all too familiar. The same cold darkness from earlier enveloped me like a hug. My eyes widened and my hand on my dagger started to tremble. My legs numbed and soon, I felt the need to throw up and pinch myself. This couldn't be real. A handsome man stepped out from the darkness and into the light. His black shiny shoes clacked on the hard cemented ground. He wore a clean pinstriped button-down and his favorite slacks. His brown hair had grown out and he wore it slicked back now. His green eyes stared right into my soul and I felt a sudden fear. His strong features moved and crinkled as his lips stretched into a sinister smile. My heart dropped and I didn't know whether a joke being played with me, or this was some type of dream. My legs buckled slightly from wanting to fall on the ground, and the man in front of me chuckled. Aside from that, I felt nothing. I was too numb to care. "Daddy." My voice came out as a whisper. He waved off the name I called him for years, even after he kicked me out of his house. He checked his watch and said, "You're a little bit late." My dad feigned a yawn and looked back at the corner. He waved his hand to another figure in the dark to come over. "Can you do me a favor? Whip her, Mom, and let Emily watch." How many times did I have to teach her to do things on time? I think this time she'll learn. "No," I screamed, tears finally spilling out of my cheeks. I jumped up on instinct. "Please don't. Please just let them." I covered my mouth with a shaking hand as the person in the corner finally stepped into the dim light. I backed up again until my back hit the wall in between my mother and Stacy. With my dad, they laughed at my weakness. His brown eyes rested on me with hatred as his handsome smirk took place on his good-looking face. His hands held a whip and the other pushed up the sleeve of his button-down. "My pleasure, George," he said, his eyes never leaving my own. Emily, his voice dripped with malice. Warren, my voice trembled. I trusted you. Chapter 29. You see, Emily, Warren sneered, taking small steps toward me. Almost as if saying my name was like a burn to his tongue. He spat it out. My hands trembled as he walked closer until he was mere feet away from me. However, it wasn't from being scared of him. It was from the shock of the realization that he played a part in all this mayhem. You should be really careful with who you trust. So, take this as a learning experience. I felt bile rise in my throat as I glared at him. I could feel my eyes glowing, indicating the first signs that my wolf wanted to come out. My skin began to ripple, the familiar white fur sprouting out in patches on my arms. My gums began to itch as my canines appeared and retracted repeatedly. My fingers began to curl as my nails turned sharp. I heard the low growl of my wolf wanting to come out. However, I held my wolf in, telling her soothing words inwardly. My father and Warren just chuckled, sending chills up my spine at how sinister it sounded. Well, would you look at that? She can barely control herself, my dad snickered. I thought healers were strong, huh, Emily? Warren said, almost angrily. He obviously hated my kind, the ones who were able to heal and only wanted to help the werewolves. She'll be stronger than you'll ever be, I heard my mom defend. She struggled in her chains, trying to break them loose. She gritted her teeth as wolfsbane burned her flesh. Shut up, you weak imbecile, my father shouted, coming up close to her and slapping her hard across the face. My mother growled, baring her canines. My heart dropped and clenched as a few tears escaped my eyes. I was too shocked to react. This couldn't have been the same father who tucked me in at night and kissed my forehead. The same father who taught Darren how to play baseball. The same father who would kiss his wife and murmur words of affection to her as he came home. You touch her again and I swear I will slap you harder than you ever slapped her, I threatened, wiping my tears away angrily. Ouch, your words hurt me, he said sarcastically. Is that any way to speak to your dad? You are no father of mine, understand? I said, pointing a finger at his chest and feeling my wolf wanting to come out again. For a split second, I saw the hurt flash in his green eyes. However, I let it slide. He deserved it after all the crap he put me through. What kind of father puts his daughter in danger? What kind of father kicks his daughter because he found some tramp? What kind of father teaches his son the proper way to treat a woman when he can't even do it himself? You're not a bastard. I made my way in front of my mom, standing in front of her protectively. A lady. My father snorted. She's an animal and because of her my kids are too. I bared my teeth, already fed up. I took a fighting stance, trying to ignore the constant growl of my wolf wanting to jump out of the tight skin encasing her. That's when my father flinched back a little, and Warren took his place protectively. Now it was my turn to chuckle. Oh, I forgot he's human. Weak and powerless, I said confidently. So tell me, George, why come here as an easy target? Wouldn't you think I would come for you right now? You wouldn't dare touch a single hair on my head, Emily. My father's voice never quavered. That's just in your nature, and if you did dare to, Warren will not hesitate to kill you. Is that right, son? He patted Warren's shoulder fatherly as Warren nodded. So now you're calling him son. Better watch out, Warren, before he abandons you too. This statement caused him to tremble. He snapped at me with his now bared canines. I rolled my eyes. Somehow I didn't feel so scared anymore. It's as if there was a calming presence around. Can I ask one question for both of you? Why? They seemed to know what exactly I was asking and smirked. Easy. I hate you creatures. You're the creatures who killed my brother, remember? George stated. When I married your mother, she knew all about it, but hid her identity for a long time. That was until Darren changed for the first time. Then I got into a fight with the bitch. She got angry and turned before my eyes. That was the real reason for the divorce. I didn't want to be married to an animal. So why not come after us then? Why not kill us? I said, trying to swallow down the information that angered and saddened me. It wasn't the right time. That was until I found Warren. Again he patted his shoulder. This time it was for Warren to continue. All the while, Warren glared at me until he unclenched his fists and crossed it over his chest. It happened 2 years ago when my mom and dad attempted to exterminate a pack they hated for good. They were doing it for the sake of the Crescent Pack. However, they were too weak. That same day I lost both my parents. And you know how they died, Emily? Warren shouted in my face, his whole body trembling. For a brief second I felt his pain. He lost both his parents. I couldn't imagine life if my mom died. It was a terrifying thought. He continued, one word. Healers. The fucking healers killed them, leaving me alone and broken. I was 16 for Christ's sake. I had no parents. I was lost. To make things worse, Alpha Thomas did nothing about it. All he did was tell me to calm down and that he would find a way to abolish healers for good. But going for the kill wasn't smart enough. We'd only get ourselves killed. They're too strong. We need to think about this first, he said, quoting Weston's words. Then he looked away angrily. That was my last straw with him. For a couple of months I was rebellious towards him, always demanding for what he came up with for revenge. As always, I'd cowered down. Although I was beta, he was alpha. I was angry. I was depressed. I was lonely. That was until I turned 17 and she walked in on our lives. She came from a totally different pack which was just recently exterminated. When we locked eyes, I knew the connection. She was my mate, but she rejected me. He said this with pain clear in his voice. I cringed, knowing how it felt to realize who your mate was. Nevertheless, feeling rejected was the part one no I'll never go through. Who's your mate? I asked quietly, not being able to hold my curiosity any further. Why don't you ask the bitch chained to the wall right now? Warren spat, his eyes beginning to water. He looked away, not wanting to meet the eyes of the girl chained up to my right. My mouth flew open. Stacy. I could see the tears spilling out of her eyes onto her cheek. You know, Warren, I loved you, I really did. But I never knew you'd physically harm me. Who does that to their mate? She said, gesturing to her body. All the while, Warren never met her eyes. However, I could sense his weakness. All I did was refuse the idea of killing Alpha Weston, Warren. That's all I did. You completely went mad. You said I was weak, but forgive me for showing respect to someone who has welcomed me to their pack. I left you in 2 months after on your 18th birthday. I came over to wish you a happy birthday, only to see you with George. I knew something was wrong and I was right. You were planning to kill Alpha Thomas so you could step up in his spot, she said, her sapphire eyes blazing with anger. I could see her wolf wanting to come out, but quickly stayed safe in the confinement of her skin when she smelt wolf's bane. Then you kidnapped me, afraid I was going to tell someone and punished me for it. Shut up, you animal, George snapped, gesturing to Warren to let him finish. Warren cleared his throat before saying, I learned how to shut down all my feelings, Emily. That's worse than feeling nothing at all, but better than feeling the pain. Along with that, I learned how to shut down the connection to my pack. And because of that, I had the strength to kill the alpha and the healers. This is all thanks to George, of course. He found me and took me in. I owe him my respect. I felt my blood run ice cold. Thomas dead. I couldn't even imagine it. Just the thought of it made my wolf howl in agony and my heart clenched tight. A snarl rippled in my chest. George chuckled and said, We forgot, son, that it's the bitch's mate. Did my father just call me a bitch? What makes you think George isn't going to kill you after he kills all of us? I snarled at Warren for being so stupid. I mean, you are part of what he hates most of all. I saw nervousness flash in George's eyes before Warren turned to look back at him. He smirked at me as if I was the stupid one. He wouldn't. I'm his son. Enough with the chit-chat, George sighed, obviously irritated. She's just trying to buy some time to figure out a plan. Whip her mom and Blondie. Afterwards, kill Emily. He started to walk away, back into the darkness. No, my mom cried. No. Emily, run. Just as Warren picked up the whip that had fallen onto the ground, I snapped. Don't you dare touch any of them. He smirked again, picking up the whip, and just as he was about to whip my mom, I grabbed my gun. Bang! The bullet hit his shoulder. I watched as he fell to the ground, the blood seeping in between his fingers. Silver Bullet and Wolf's Bane. They weren't the only ones with weapons. That should keep him down for a long time. I put the gun back in my waistband. I turned to my mother to figure out a way to escape, when a hand clamped my mouth shut and a blade was put at my throat. I could smell the wolf's bane as it slightly burned my throat. That was very bad of you, Emily, George seethed. What makes you think I can't take you here right now? You're just a human, I snapped back. Oh, Emily, Emily, Emily. You really are a poor wolf. You can't see the hunters that are hidden in the dark. I adjusted my eyesight and sure enough I could see them all clutching rifles and knives. Wow, this wolfsbane really does mess with wolves. All of a sudden, heavy footsteps fell into the room. Low growls filled the air. Soon my nostrils sniffed the air and the calm presence that wrapped around me earlier made sense. Thomas was here. And they were going to kill him. I just knew it. Not only was Thomas here but everyone else. The Crescent and Stone Pack, including my brother, stood before me. They snarled and growled, baring their canines. All of their eyes dilated into a dark black. Isn't this a sight? George chuckled, tightening his hold on me. The Crescent and Stone Pack actually standing together. You know, Warren told me so much about you people. Or shall I say animals? Let me just say good luck. You just fell into my trap. Just as he pressed the blade into my skin and Weston's growl ripped in the air, one of the hunters shot a bullet towards Jet, who leaned back due to his fast reflexes. That was all it took for the war to start. They shifted, clothes ripping and falling to the damp groan. Snarls rippled in the air and a howl from both Jared and Weston, telling them to start the fight. I watched as two wolves threw two hunters to the wall, watching them fall to the ground in a heap. You're coming with me, George huffed, pulling my struggling body along. When he pressed the blade deeper, I whimpered, until a platinum-colored wolf swept in from the side and nudged George out of the way. Its sapphire eyes met mine before she nodded at the fighting crowd. Shift, Stacy stated simply through the mind link before helping Jade tear the chains off of my mother. I shifted, my white fur taking over my whole body. I began running towards a hunter with graying hair as it focused its gun at Weston. I jumped over the crates, snapping at his side hard enough so he fell to the ground and won't get back up again. Thanks, Els, I heard Thomas say in my mind. Why are you here and how did you find me? I said, growling as I pushed a hunter off Alex's back and threw the spear a hunter was about to throw at Dustin. I specifically told you not to come. I'm your mate and the mark you're wearing helped me find you. So shut up because I couldn't live with myself if you were buried underground. He grunted as a blade grazed his skin. He snapped at the hunter before nipping at its shoulder. That's how it went for about 5 minutes, 10 wolves against 100 hunters. About 20 were dead, majority unconscious, and the left fighting for what they believed was right. The wolves had minor injuries and thankfully, no bullets were shot at anyone. That was until the shot rang through the air and a feminine wolf cried out in pain. Jade. I threw the hunter off me as I watched her wolf fall to the ground before weakly getting up. She snapped the last chain off my mom before throwing an oncoming hunter out of the way. Thomas growled angrily and killed the hunter who had shot his sister. Before my mom could change into her wolf form, George appeared out of nowhere, tackling my mom to the ground with him on top. I started running towards her when George picked up his dagger ready to plunge it into my mother's heart, when a searing pain took over in my shoulder. With teary eyes, I saw Darren fly over my mom and threw George to a nearby wall, hearing a sickening crack sound. However, I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to run when the searing pain in my shoulder got worse. Someone stabbed me. I heard Jared, Weston, and Darren growl at the same time before they all came running to me to help. I felt as 2 hunters tried to push me into a crated box. Another one came and then another. I stopped struggling as another piercing sound struck the air, and watched horridly as Darren fell to the ground with a whimper. Then I snapped at the hunter that was in front and bit into his leg, liking the sound of his cry. I threw him off. Another one was thrown off of me as I shook my body angrily. The other one was pinned down by Thomas, and just as he was about to shoot him in between the head, Thomas bit into his neck, killing him. I felt the spear on my shoulder get pulled out immediately before it plunged into Jared's side. I turned my head to the hunter, hearing Jared's howl, and immediately killed him with my teeth. I felt the warm blood stick to my white fur and shook. My first kill. I wasn't in shock long before I heard another shot and Eli's cry of pain. Abigail and Jet killed that hunter immediately. As one of the remaining hunters went to kill Abigail, Stacy stopped in with Charles to finish him off. The remaining hunters ran away, seeing as they were weak and outnumbered in strength. Everyone shifted into their human forms, groaning in pain as they did so. I felt the pain in my shoulder and squeezed my eyes shut as I left my hand heal the wound. Thomas came over to me, pulling a big shirt over my head to cover my body. He put his arm around my waist and pulled me towards the group. Everyone was helping each other fix their wounds. Everyone was weak. Those who were infected by wolfsbane were pale. Each one of us were covered in dirt and blood. When we get back, Emily will heal all of you. As you can see, she's a healer, Thomas said to the group. I refuse any one of you to kill her or to touch her, understand? Why would we? Eli said, struggling to take the bullet out from his shoulder. Sure, we hate healers, but Emily proved us wrong. I'm pretty sure we'll all accept the healers. We need them, Wes. The whole group nodded and turned to my mom, whose sobs grew louder. I'm so sorry, baby, she said to Darren, trying to pull out the bullet on his leg. He grunted in pain and stopped her fumbling hands. We'll have to clean our wounds at home, where it's less likely to infect us some more, Darren said. But in the meantime, I'm sorry, Emily. For what? I questioned. I should be the one sorry. I led you guys here. I was the one who. Darren raised his hands up to stop me. No, Emily, not for that. His eyes softened and a tear trailed down his cheek. Dad's dead. Chapter 30. As I watched my father's coffin slowly descend into the ground, a tear rolled down my warm cheek. Thomas kept a warm arm around my waist for comfort, which I was greatly thankful for. My hand clutched my brother's own tightly as he kept a straight face, not sure how to deal with all this quite yet. My mom sent us a sympathetic smile, rubbing our backs. There weren't many people here at the funeral. In fact, the only ones here were my mom, Darren, Kelly, Weston, Sandra, and me. The sound of the heavy sobs of Sandra filled the silence as she trembled and collapsed onto the floor. I rolled my eyes. Just earlier today, she snapped at the lawyer for not giving her the amount of money she wanted. You may be thinking, why am I crying? Well, he was still my dad. I grew up around him and his morals. He was there to wipe the tears off my face when I had a scratch on my knee. He was there as I learned how to ride a bike. He made me my favorite cocoa and marshmallows when I had a nightmare. He was there like any other father. And just like that, he was gone. He left this earth with the memory of me snapping at him, refusing to be called his child, and refusing to spend some time with him. Sure, he caused me great pain. He watched as I suffered, almost killed my boyfriend, and tried to kidnap me for hopes that he would find both the Crescent and Stone Pack and the healers. But, again, he was still my father. We left the burial and headed for my house, where we all just sat on the stone bench in the garden and looked at the stars that littered on the black stretch of canvas. My mom excused herself to help Aunt Felly whip up something to eat. Thomas and Kelly went inside for a bit to give Darren and I some alone time. How's the pack? Darren asked, his voice loud in the silence. Good, actually. I was strong enough to heal the wounds just a bit, but wolfsbane still infected it. Other than that, it won't be too serious. In fact, they're up and at it, trying to train harder this time around. That's my little sis, Darren smiled proudly, ruffling my hair. What did I say? You are strong. Tell me why again. Because you're my brother, I laughed, reminiscing in the times he used to tell me that when I was feeling down. What about Warren? You haven't updated me on that kid. After the fight with the hunters, we found that Warren disappeared. It wasn't hard to find him, though. Thomas just sniffed his scent trail, and the blood on the floor was a huge indication. He wasn't too far off either. Apparently, George did try to kill him. Go figure. One hunter stabbed his leg with a spear, and he was limping into the forest where we found him washing out his wound in the river. Thomas kind of noticed Warren's connection to the pack being broken, but dismissed it because he thought it was his way of dealing with his parents' death. Thomas was also angered by the thought that Warren tried to kill his mate, so on instinct he tried to kill Warren right away. That was until Stacy stepped in and stood up for him, although the crap Warren put her through. Warren had a mental illness where his wolf shut him off because of going against his pack and hurting his mate. This caused him to go crazy. Therefore, he was admitted into a wolf camp and won't be coming back until he had the proper treatment. Until then, Thomas promised to welcome him back to the pack because they were best friends. Eli will be taking his spot as beta from here on out. It went silent for a while, the crickets making noise in the night sky. The silence actually comforted me, but I felt Darren's tension. I looked at him, but he refused to look back. It's all my fault, Darren sighed, running his hand through his dark hair. I looked up at him in question and laid my head against his tense shoulder. Dad's gone because I killed him. I froze. This is what he was tense about. He felt it was his fault that our father is gone. He was holding this all in and not knowing how to cope with it. I flicked his ear, watching as he flinched and turned to look at him. Darren Saunders, don't you dare say or even think that. You protected Mom. Just think if you didn't save Mom, she'd be the one dead and possibly Dad too. I tried convincing him, but it sounded as if I was convincing myself as well. You're right, he finally gave in. I'm just sorry, Emily, that he treated you that way. Again, the silence engulfed us before he cleared his throat and threw an arm around my shoulder, trying to change the topic. So, my sister being a healer isn't that exciting. It has its ups and downs. The thing that sucks is I have no background. I can't even train properly. I don't have any sources. For example, I can't just heighten my senses like regular wolves. I can't shift like regular wolves. It took me a while to figure it out, and that's not even half of it. I groaned in frustration and replayed the words my dad had said to me. Oh, Emily, Emily, Emily. You really are a poor wolf. You can't see the hunters that are hidden in the dark. So what are you going to do about it? He asked, nudging my shoulder. I've talked to Mom, I said, dumping the bombshell that I was too afraid to tell anyone. She said the only way I could do this was to go down to South Dakota where the rest of the roads are. So, are you going to do it? I looked at his sad face before nodding. I have to, Dar. It's the only way I could become better. It's the only way I could stay alive. He flinched. What did you say? Part of being a healer is to heal people properly. I myself can't even do that. Mom told me that the ancient healers will take my life if I didn't know how to use my powers correctly. It's the prophecy. When do you leave? You do know that's pretty far from here. We live in Alabama, for Christ's sakes, Darren said after a while. I could tell he was trying to digest all of this. Did you tell Weston? In a week, and no, I haven't told Weston. Tell me what? Thomas jogged up to me, hugging me from behind. He kissed his mark before pecking me on the lips. I felt my whole body tingle and the pit of my stomach began to flutter as happiness swelled up in me. Fire ignited where his lips touched my skin and where his arms were wrapped around my stomach. He sat down beside me when Darren made up some lame excuse to help Kelly with something. He smiled that gorgeous smile at me and nuzzled his face into my neck and bringing me in for a hug. I'm sorry about your dad, babe. I don't know how to respond to that, I said as I caressed his face in my hands. It's okay. I didn't know how either when my mom passed. He quickly shook off the sadness that hid in his eyes before turning to me again. So what was it you were going to tell me? I looked into his beautiful blue eyes that I came to memorize before smiling sadly at him. Remember how I told you that I was finding it hard to be a healer, how I needed help from my own species? He nodded, his smile faltering a bit. I felt my heart clench. Well, I talked to my mom about it and she suggested I live with my family at South Dakota for a while. I need this, Weston. I need it to become stronger to put my powers to use. I left out the part about the dying because I don't think he could cope with it. So then I'll come with you, he said, standing up and looking at the moon. I'll go with you and we could live in South Dakota for as long as you need and come back. Wes, I don't want you to come with me, I said quietly, but I know he heard me. He snapped his face at me and I could tell he was hurting in the inside. He refused to show it as his eyes grew an ice-cold blue. What do you mean you don't want me to come with you? I'm your mate. Wes, you're an alpha. You can't just walk away from your pack. They need you. You can't, so what? Eli can step up and be alpha, Thomas tried to reason with me. Just until we come back. I dropped my smile and stood in front him, looking at him seriously. You can't come with me. You're my mate, Thomas said angrily, his voice rising just a bit. I don't care if I'm my position. I don't care if I'm not in a pack when I go there. I don't care if I'm surrounded by healers. I just want you. You're my mate. I felt my heart breaking at my next words, knowing it was going to break his heart as well. However, I couldn't be selfish with him. I mean, I could let him follow me. I could let him drop his alpha duty just for my benefit. Because I loved him in the pack, leaving him here was the best thing to do. Just by the way he was standing, I knew he wasn't going to stand down until I agreed for him to come with me. So I did what I had to do. Weston's POV. Weston, this can't work between us, Emily said. A single tear rolled off her cheek. Her words hit me like a wave, almost making me tumble to the ground. She looked serious, her green eyes calculating my every move. Every word that was said felt like a blow to my stomach. My heart felt like she was squeezing it herself. I clenched my fists, trying to ignore the pain that was growing inside me, trying to ignore my wolf's cry. My vision blurred as tears built up in my eyes. Weston, she said softly, trying to gain my attention. I love you, I said between clenched teeth. I punched the stone bench as hard as I could, my werewolf strength leaving a crack. My eyes blazed from my own anger. She was leaving me. She didn't even care to give it a chance. I knew I'd stay faithful even if she was miles away. But she didn't give me a chance. What if she found someone else when she was there? What if she married him and had kids with him? I felt my wolf howl in agony at the thought, and a low growl erupted from my chest. I marked you, my voice began to falter. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Don't you love me? I do love you, but we aren't going to work out, Weston. There it was again, the blow to my stomach and the same clench to my aching heart. I turned away, feeling a tear trickle down my cheek. Suddenly I was angry. Bullshit, I said, not turning to face her again. I felt my hands clench into fists as I walked away. If you loved me, you'd give it a chance. Have fun in South Dakota, Emily, I said bitterly. I felt her flinch as I used her full name. I ignored my wolf as I got into my car. He was howling at me to gather his mate in his arms, knowing she was crying as well. He wanted me to go back there to remind her the love that they shared. But I refused it. I growled at him back, letting him know she didn't care for us anymore. As I entered the pack house, both packs were there. They abruptly stopped their laughter and conversations as they heard me slam the front door in rage. I stood there as they took in my red-rimmed eyes and the tear streaks on my cheeks. Move, I ordered. Someone tapped me on the shoulder as I made my way in between the crowd, but I growled. Touch me again and you will lose a fucking finger. I locked the door to my room once I got in. I put my back against the door, slowly sliding to the floor as my chest ached at the thought of Emily. Quickly standing up in another fit of rage, I grabbed everything on my side of the room, throwing it across to the other wall. I let out my growl of pain and a frustrated groan, pulling on my hair. Weston, I heard Jade call from the other side, knocking on the door softly. Open up. Fuck off, Jade, I commanded. I could already tell my statement hurt her as I heard her soft footsteps patter down the staircase and the soft murmurs of both packs. The silence that came next was worse than hearing nothing at all. My wolf wasn't even howling anymore, nor was he growling. He stayed silent, and I knew he was just as hurt as I was. I felt my anger diminish, but it was better than what I was feeling now. Empty. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and let's strengthen our pack.